So what I want to do is I want to start off with a pop quiz, because these are questions that you're going to see up here that we've been writing down that we've received over the last several months from individual investors. And so the first one, I can protect my dinar with a grantor trust. Anybody venture to guess, is that true or false? If you don't answer, I will just call on you. Greg, true or false? False. You say, why do you say false? I like it. We got a mathematician and a jokester in here. Okay. So, Greg, whatever work we do for you, it's double. Eric, would you like to take a guess on this? False? Why? It just doesn't sound right, does it? Maybe it's the way I'm asking the question. It makes it seem like it's false. Well, has anybody been on a call where somebody has promoted the use of trust in asset protection planning and told you to go out and set up a trust? You have, is it Lisa? Right there, shaking your head. I'm sorry, I can't see it. Linda, I'm sorry. Linda, you were on a call. What did they tell you? Set up a trust, put your dinar into the trust, and if somebody sues you, they can't take your dinar from you. And in fact, I've talked to some individuals, they told me they were going to get a package deal. They could get 10 trusts for $5,000 if they for asset protection. And I asked them, I go, why do you need 10? Isn't one sufficient? Oh no, you got to break everything up. I thought to myself, and I asked them this, I said, if you have, I'm going to steal this. If you have one trust with all your cash and dinar in there, and it provides asset protection, why do you need to break it up into two separate trusts? It doesn't make sense, because asset protection is asset protection. If it's all safe assets inside of one trust, then you're protected. Now, what most individuals do not realize, with a grantor trust, it's not going to provide asset protection for you. A grantor trust will provide zero asset protection. The answer to this is false. There's no protection with the trust. And in fact, if you wanted to create what we call a self-settled trust, where you create it for yourself and put some asset in there, such as the dinar, and then on revaluation it becomes currency, and you're holding on to that currency and you're looking for protection, you would have to go to a jurisdiction like Nevada or Alaska and open up that trust. That is because those jurisdictions have specifically formulated legislation that permits a self-settled trust that will provide you asset protection after its creation. But what you also must understand is if you go down this road and you choose a jurisdiction, there's about 8 or 12 of them out there, I believe, that offer asset protection trusts, there's rules that go along with it. For instance, are you comfortable turning over control of your money to somebody else, like an attorney? Why not? No. You don't want to do that, but they don't tell you that on the call. Okay, so you'd have to turn over your money typically to a trustee who lives or resides in that jurisdiction. So if you wanted to set up a trust for asset protection, you wanted to set it up in Nevada, then you have to hire somebody there to serve as your trustee. Now, once the money's inside of there, if you want to gain access to your money that's inside of the trust, you have to ask your trustee, petition your trustee to give you money. Now, your trustee can decide yes or no if he wants to give you those funds, but if all he did was issue funds every time you asked for it, you just lost all your asset protection. Other things they don't tell you about this is that the assets typically have to be held in that trust for a minimum of 3 years before they'll be protected from creditors. Or the assets actually have to reside in the state where the trust is created. So when we look at trusts, they're typically not a great choice for asset protection for you, for your investments, because you're not going to gain the protection that you're seeking. And it's not going to be as represented by most individuals. And what I've listened to, because I've listened to a couple of these calls, typically you hear the same thing over and over again. They're not attorneys. You don't need an attorney to do this. Anybody can do it. I have special trust that was set up by the IRS. It's been drafted by Scots on Trust or adopted by that, or I forget the exact terminology they use. But at the end of the day, it's not going to provide the protection people are seeking. But if you wanted to create a trust for your child, yes, you could get that type of protection. But for you, yourself, or protecting your investment, they will not work. Unfortunately, a lot of people that we've run into have bought into this and have created trusts with the false belief that should anything happen to them, they'd be sued, that trust is going to be there to protect them. So I want to get that out there so people know right away when it comes to trusts, trusts are typically not going to be used for asset protection. The answer is false. Here's another one. A C corporation will not save me on income taxes. I've run into quite a few people who have told me that they've placed their dinar into a C corporation that they put up or put together in Nevada or Wyoming. Now, do you think it's going to save you on taxes, Nick, if you convert your dinar into cash and it's held in a C corp? Nope. Why not? Absolutely. Nick says it will actually add to his tax base. It will add to your overall, the amount of tax you pay. Because when you place your dinar, this currency, into the C corporation, and you, after the RV, you exchange it into dollars, that is income to the corporation. It's income to the C corporation. The only way you can get that out of there is to either take it out as a salary or to take it out as a dividend. If you take it out as a salary, okay, it's going to be subject to income taxes, plus it's going to be subject to employment taxes. So now you've increased your tax bite on that. If you take it out as a dividend, it's going to be subject to 15% dividends tax plus the corporate tax rate as well on those investments. So overall, you'd be looking at about, I'd say a 45% tax bracket. Much better to keep it in your own name. I wouldn't use a C corporation to place any of your currency in. It will increase your overall tax rate. So it's true. A corporation will increase your taxes if you hold your currency inside of it. It's not to mention C corporations aren't good for certain types of things, but at this point, pay for. All right, so another thing, other challenges, how to protect your wealth from a tax standpoint. Okay, there's ways to do it. Most people don't understand it. Brace yourself. The chances of being audited are rising, so if it happens, you hear what to do and what not to do. This was from the Wall Street Journal last year. There's another one from the LA Times talking about taxation. Here's the IRS's or the government's response to the deficit. The way we're going to cure the deficit is not by raising taxes right now. Is it by cutting spending? Oh, sure it is. We're going to cut $8 billion. That's a step in the right direction towards $13 trillion. How you get there, I don't know. But anyways, they're going to enforce the current tax code. And the way they're going to go about doing this is by increasing audits, and you've already seen it start. They believe that there are a set number of individuals out there who underreport their income or do not report their income, and that if they were able to capture that income, it would generate so many more billions of dollars a year in tax revenue that we don't have to do anything different. All we have to do is get those people who are not paying to start paying into the system, and we'll solve a lot of this problem just through forced compliance. So let's just start auditing people. And that's what the IRS is doing now. They're increasing their audits of individuals as a means to collect additional revenue. And they're putting burdens on people. For example, if you own rental real estate, you're considering getting into that. If you hire somebody to come out and work on your property, now you have to 1099 them if you pay them more than $600 in 1 year. Never used to have to do that. Now we're forcing us, putting the burden on the individual taxpayer to do more for the government because they can't do their job and get people to pay taxes. So they're going to say, we're going to draft all of you to report on them, make our job easier. And we'll collect money off of them and solve the issue. But it won't. Funds for your creditor. So you got to be careful. All right, so the idea here is to judgment-proof yourself. I like this picture. The reason I put it up there is because the guy's standing around going, hey man, I got nothing. What are you going to take from this individual if he pulls his pockets out and there's nothing there because nothing is in his own name that the creditor can attach? The answer to that is typically there's nothing to get. You're not going to get paid. And so you have to understand that you can put yourself in that situation. You do not want to find yourself in this situation. Boxes, you've just boxed up all of your assets. So you own the box. You no longer own the assets themselves. You own the box. So as the owner of the box, you're insulated from whatever happens inside of the box. So if you have assets inside of here and something happens and a lawsuit develops inside of the box, anything happened to me? Has anything happened to me? No. No, nothing's happened to me because I own the box. The box can have all the liability at once, but nothing happens to Clint. You see the asset protection there? You see how I'm unprotected? Because the liability stays trapped in this box, and I can just throw the box away afterwards. And all that problem that happened inside of here will stay with the box. But is that asset protection? It doesn't sound like it, does it? Because what did I put in here initially? Everything. Yeah, but what were those things? Dinars. Yeah, but weren't they hard pieces of candy? I put in hard pieces of candy into one box, a whole bunch of them. And look what's happened because of one lawsuit. Do not come up and talk to me and say that you slipped on a piece of candy. Okay, I've now warned you. There's candy on the ground up here. I'm sorry I took your candy. All right, the point is that the candy, you put all the assets into one box, we put dissimilar assets into here, one lawsuit, turned it all into sugar. Everything was at risk inside of this one box. So when we talk about asset protection, we're going to break your assets up based upon asset classifications. That is, if they're safe assets, put all the safe assets into one box. So can I borrow this one right here? What's your favorite flavor, orange or blue? Okay, we'll leave some oranges here. You like purple? No. Okay, so if all of this stuff is safe, this is all dinar and cash and gold, goes into there. You know why? That's never going to create liability for you. You're not going to be sued from holding that type of asset because it doesn't do anything. People aren't getting hurt. What, are you going to have somebody over and say, look at the dinar. Here, you want to hold one? As soon as they grab it, you pull it back real quick and give them this sharp paper cut across their hand. And then they start screaming because they're hemophiliac. And they start bleeding out right there, and you can't staunch the bleeding. Does that sound absurd to you? I think so. And so I just thought of that off the cuff. That'd be the only liability you might ever have from owning dinar inside of a box. Okay. Well, you understand that there's no way to avoid taxes unless you give the dinar to a charity. If you take the dinar and cash it in your own name, it's taxable to you. Then you turn around and you give that income to your charity, your tithe. That is a tax deduction for you. But you first pay tax on that income you received upon the trade-in, and then you get a tax deduction for whatever you contribute. And the way the tax deduction works is you can write off up to 50% of your income for charitable contributions. 50% is the max. The problem with that is you have to pay tax on it. So if you have if you're planning to gift away to charity some of your newfound wealth, my response to that would be to give them the actual dinar and instruct your pastor, whoever you're giving it to go down and trade it in themselves. Because they're a tax-exempt entity. They will not have to pay taxes on that conversion, and that way they will receive more overall wealth in that manner. So if you gave them, $1 million dinar and it came out at $2, you just gave them $2 million. But if your intent was just to take this $1 million dinar and give it to them and you go down and you cash it in, well, you better set aside some for taxes. And so it would be something less than the $2 million that you want to give them because you have to pay income tax on it first. So that's how I would address that. Now, the other option you have is with charitable remainder trust. And Greg's going to go into this in detail tomorrow, but that's the second option we have up here. And people often ask me, when do I set this up? The answer to that is after the RV. Can't even consider it for you right now. The reason we can't consider it, because we don't know what it's going to come out at, we don't know when it's going to RV, and I have to crunch numbers that are based upon your age, the date you're going to make the contribution, and the current AFR rate that's put out by the government for that month, or I can go back 2 months. So these all determine what your payout is from this CRT. And that's going to be covered in more detail tomorrow. But what is the CRT? It's another box. but it's a little different box. If you take your dinar and you cash them in your own name, you're going to pay tax on this money. And then when you take and you contribute it into this charitable remainder trust, you're going to receive a tax deduction. Okay, but I had to pay tax first and then I get a tax deduction. So the net effect is the IRS benefits. If you want to make sure that you benefit, what you need to do is take your dinar, do not cash it in, but put it directly into your charitable remainder trust that you've created after it RVs, and then cash it in. Now when you cash it in into the name of the box. It's cashed into the name of the CRT, so the income then is attributed to this box. The CRT does not pay tax on the money it receives.
What's the CRT?
Charitable Remainder Trust. Now what does that mean? That when you and your wife pass away, then whatever's left inside of this box will go to a charity. It's distributed out to the charity of your choosing. As many charities you want. Or you can turn it into a private foundation. Your kids can run it for their lives and your future generations. Lots of things we can do with that. We'll cover it tomorrow. But it's a great tool because anything that's generated inside of here is not taxed inside of here. The only time it gets taxed is when you take the money out of the box. That is when it pays money out to you. That's when it's going to be taxed to you. And it's taxed to you based upon how it was earned inside of the box. Do you know what municipal bonds are? Municipal bonds, munis, you ever heard of that term? Okay, they're issued by state governments or municipalities actually who issue them to raise money for certain projects. They want to put in some water system or something like that, so they issue these munis. Now, in order to entice people to help out the municipality to fund this project, the interest you receive from munis, return you get on your investment there, is tax-free. Now, it's not a huge return typically. They offer a lower return, but in order to entice you to give them the money, they say that the money you receive is tax-free. So if my charitable remainder trust invested in nothing but municipal bonds, munis, then the income I pulled out of it would be tax-free to me. Because that's how it was earned inside of here, therefore it's tax-free to me when I get it. So if I converted my dinar into cash, there's no tax because it's in the CRT, and then I take that cash and I put it into stock in Apple, because I'm expecting them to come out with iPad 3 by the end of the year, and their stock's going to continue to climb, and I hold on to it for a year and I sell all this stock. I've held the stock for a year, and then I take out a distribution. Is it taxed to me? Ordinary income, short-term gains, long-term capital gains are not taxed. Any ideas? Long-term capital gains because I held the stock for a year. So that's how the CRT works. Now, the question that people often ask me is, do I need a CRT? Or no, actually, I don't tell you, that's not a question. More of it's a statement. I need a CRT. And I said, convince me. Well, I have 8 million dinar. I want to put a portion of that into the CRT and not pay tax. Do you really? How do you know? Because you don't know. You've got 8 million dinar. If it came out at $8, would you want to put some into a CRT? I know. Just play with me, would you? 64 million, right? How much can you spend? Nick's going, all of it in about a year. Sorry. Just had to play with you a little bit there. You say 64 million. Yeah, I'm going to use a CRT. I don't need all that money right away. But what happens if it comes out at 50 cents? Now is a CRT something you're even going to consider if you only have $4 million? Or do you want that money to go out and buy a new house, pay off some debt, make things easier? So this CRT is something that we look at after the RV. We determine what is the RV rate, and then I'm going to ask you, how much do you want to live on? Because you should not put all of your money into the CRT and use that as your sole source of income. I would discourage you from that. So I tell people, you figure out what that number is that's going to make your life comfortable for you. That should remain in your name. That should stay in the LLC, remain in your name. Anything above that, we can deal with. But I've run into individuals before who have made the mistake. It wasn't through our firm. They've worked with other people. We detest the use of wills because the fact it requires the use of an attorney when you pass away in order to pass your estate on. And I have this argument probably once a year. My wife tells me to stop doing it, or I'm going to lose my friend. His name's Jake Potek. He's an attorney in Gig Harbor. We do a lot with that family. But she goes, you're going to lose him. Because I always challenge him on it. I go, now why are you creating wills for people? Why don't you set them up in living trusts? And he'll give me some excuse. He said, you know, it sounds to me like you just want to make sure you get the probate. Well, really, they need to have somebody make sure this and that. And I go, why? Are they that stupid? You only take on people who don't understand how to pass on assets to other people? Is that who you're working with? No, I didn't say that. Well, it sure sounds like it from my point of view that they can't handle it on their own and they need you. Is that what you tell them when you bring them in, that there's no way you could ever do this on your own? It's got to be me handling it. I bet that discussion never comes up. Do you tell your clients ahead of time that when they die with that will that you're going to probate it and you're going to charge their estate to do it? Does that come up? No, that's to the elephant that's in the room that nobody's looking at or you're just trying to hide. Why not tell them, give them the option, hey, you could create a document where you would never have to see me again. You could pass on all your affairs, all your assets without the use of the court system, and it would be private. Nobody would know what you had and who received what, and we can ensure that if they aren't ready for it yet, they don't get it. How does that sound? I think most people would say that sounds pretty darn good. But the fact is, we don't get that information. And we go the same route that we've been taught by our parents, is we create a will when we think we have the estate at the right point in time, and a lot of times that never occurs. We don't see where it happens. We miss the opportunity. I know when my mother's father passed away, my grandfather, she was only 10 years old, but they had this prime waterfront on the Hood Canal, sandy beach. It was a fishing resort, and he had 3 daughters left, each of them one lot. And then my grandmother got everything else. Well, as life would turn, my aunt decided to move back in with my grandmother when I was about 8 or 7, and she moved back in with my grandmother to help her and her husband. Help her do what? Spend her money is what she did. And she started selling off all my grandmother's property. And so my dad, who's a very, as I said, strong-willed person, told my mom, you see what your sister is doing to your mother? She is going to leave her penniless if this goes on. You need to tell your mother to kick her out and stop this before it gets out of control. Well, my mom shies away from conflict. And she sat back and she tried to bring it up, but my grandmother didn't believe it, and so she just stopped. Well, everything went on like this for a couple of years, and finally what my aunt did, she sold my mother's lot. Yeah, she sold my mother's lot. This was left to my mom in a will. My grandmother was supposedly in control of it. There was no trust set up for my mother, so she sold my mother's lot. And what did my mother have to do then? She sued. Now, do you sue the aunt who sold it, or do you sue your mother who was in control of it? You sue your mother. Now, she sued her mother not for the money, and it was a good piece of money, waterfront property like that, is because she thought that by bringing this case that it would wake her mother up as to what was going on under her own roof. I mean, everybody else saw it. RVs being purchased, garages being created off my grandmother's house. My grandmother didn't know how to drive, never owned a car. But, you know, houses being remodeled that my grandmother lived in for my aunt and her husband. And as a result of that, it galvanized my aunt and my grandmother and my mother's other sister against us. And the money, I remember when they got the judgment, my grandfather represented my family, of course, and after he took his fee, he didn't work for free, for sure. My mom told my dad, she goes, I don't want to see this money, I don't want anything to do with this money, I did not do it for this. I don't care what you do with it, burn it for all I care. Because I remember that conversation, because I was a little kid, and you're like, burn money? I'll buy a comic book. So, yeah, toys, Army men. So, I didn't see my grandmother from the ages of 12 or so, or 10, it seemed like a long time. Might have been younger than that, until I was 16 years of age. And my grandmother showed up on our steps. A cab dropped her off, and she's there with 2 suitcases. She moved out of her own house because she finally realized what was going on. And this was all left up to this will, which did not provide any controls to